The information provided on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, tax, or legal advice. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Any investment decisions you make are solely your responsibility. You should consult with a professional to determine what may be best for your individual needs. When you see someone on TV, whether you're watching a sitcom or a pro sporting event, there's a tendency to look at the people you see and think, they must be rich. They must be set for life. In fact, a career in the public eye has its ups and downs, both personally and financially. Athletes and actors need to plan carefully and be ready for change. That's also true of your own life, even if your only chance of making it on TV is if you fall in a swimming pool and someone sends a clip to America's Funniest Home Videos. I'm Jay Gabler of Forum Communications, and this is Plain Money Talk, a podcast all about your financial life and the things that are affecting it today. Today, I'm joined by Brooks Bollinger, a wealth management director at Bell Bank. Yes, you might have seen him on TV. He was a quarterback in the NFL from 2003 to 2009, playing for teams including my home state team, the Minnesota Vikings. He's going to share his story, which may have some surprising lessons for you and me when it comes to our pocketbooks. Brooks, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
Well, we like to start these episodes with 5 quick questions just to get things rolling, and then we'll back up and cover things in more detail. But if you will, I'm going to ask 5 questions. Just answer them as relatively quickly as you can, and then we'll back it up again and get into things in more depth. Does that work for you?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. First quick question. Is it fun to be a pro football player?
It's the best job in the world. You wouldn't always know when you walk into a locker room on a day of a long practice on a Tuesday or Wednesday in the NFL. There's plenty of complaining going on, but it's the best job in the world.
I believe it. Do you miss the Metrodome?
I actually was just saying that, no offense to the beautiful U.S. Bank Stadium and what the Wolves have done over there, but I do miss the Metrodome. The environment, I could still kind of smell it a little bit. It had a unique vibe to it, but the noise and the closeness of the fans and whatever, it was a special place to play. And even when I was playing at Wisconsin, I enjoyed playing in the Metrodome.
And as a fan, you get that whoosh on your way out the door.
Yeah.
So third quick question. What's the biggest change you've experienced in your personal or professional life?
There's no cheerleaders anymore, there's nobody, there's not the cheering fans. I think the biggest thing is when you're playing and you have, or coaching, and you have those seasons, you have these big moments of wins or losses. You prepare for the week. It either goes well or it doesn't. The jubilation of winning or kind of the despair of defeat, you experience on these regular cadences. And then you start over in the off season to go build kind of this new mission with all these little battles that are mapped out in front of you. And you just don't have that as much in everyday life, right? You don't have those landmark moments as often than you get to have in sports. So it's just different.
I was in academia for quite a while, and I do miss that rhythm of the academic year.
Yep.
To the sense, okay, you build up to the fall, and you get through the year, then you get the summer, get a little breathing room, and then, start again. So I get what you're saying about that rhythm.
And nobody gives you an itinerary, right? That was one thing when you're playing and coaching. It was like, okay, here's where you need to be. Here's when this is going to happen. There's a schedule. And now I feel like even with my family, in personal life, but also in professional life, you kind of have to create that for yourself. You have to create those moments and those landmarks. But it's certainly a little different. And yeah, you miss hearing the crowd cheer every now and then too.
Yeah. So 4th quick question. What's a football expression that you still use in daily life?
You don't go broke taking a profit. That was Herm Edwards in New York Jets. He wasn't a quarterback guy. He's more of a defensive guy. But if there was somebody open, it's don't wait for the next guy to come open, right? If you got the easy pass in front of you, make the play, make the simple play, make the routine plays routinely. That's another, coachism. I grew up around it, so I could probably sit here and talk in coachisms for the next hour. But Herm used to just, he'd kind of pause the film or you'd hear him chirp from the sidelines. Hey, you don't go broke taking a profit. Make the easy play first.
We're golfers in my family, and my uncle likes to say 90% of all putts left short do not go into the hole.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So fifth quick question, and probably the hardest one, sorry, but if you had to guess, how many Super Bowls are the Vikings going to win in my lifetime?
Oh, man, there's a lot of variables there, especially right now. I'm going to say they're going to win 2 in your lifetime.
All right. I know I can't hold you to that, but I'll take that as a good sign.
I was up all night trying to prepare for that question and doing a lot of modeling and equations, and I came down to 2. So.
Well, let's back up again. Thanks for rolling with those 5 quick questions. Now, this is the point of the episode where usually we'd ask our guests to say a little bit more about themselves, where they live, how they got into their field of work. But this episode's a little bit different because more of this episode is really going to be about your personal story. So given that, Brooks, I'd love to start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up, and did you always dream about being a pro athlete?
I grew up in Grand Forks, North Dakota. My dad was a coach at the University of North Dakota for most of my life. So I got to grow up around the game. There's a picture of me in the hospital, 5 minutes after I was born with a football in my hand. And, my dad just kind of said, this guy's going to be a quarterback. Now, it wasn't, Pete Maravich or any of that stuff where he was grinding on me or forcing me to be it, but it was just always in the fabric of how I grew up. I was very fortunate. My heroes played for my dad at UND. I got to be around them. I got to go to practice. I got to, throw to them in warm-ups and be in the film room and probably learn words I shouldn't have learned a little soon in life. But it was a great way to grow up. I always say we didn't have a ton of money, but we had the keys to the gym. And Grand Forks was a town that really reinforced both the youth and high school athletics. It was a great environment. I had great peers, great coaches. So, but I would say this, the first pro game that I ever went to, I had a uniform on for the New York Jets. So I never really dreamt beyond college, if I'm being honest. I guess I dreamt of being a pro football player, but I really just loved playing the game, and I just assumed I'd be a college player. That was never even really a question in my mind. I was just going to play college football. So, yeah, it just kind of, I was kind of fortunate in that way, in that I got to enjoy every level that I was at and really play it without looking kind of to the next chapter or worrying too much about what the future held. And probably I was probably dreaming of being a coach more so than I was ever, dreaming of being a player. And it just kind of worked out that, it translated enough that even though I didn't probably have all the physical attributes to be an NFL player, that I got the opportunity to do that and have really a great experience.
Clearly, you have a lot of admiration for the coaches in your life, including your father, and now you're carrying that legacy forward, both on the field and one might say in your professional life as well, your new day job, relatively new.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think that when I got done playing, I did coach a little bit in high school and college, and then when that didn't quite work as well for the family, and I made a transition into the real world, I was very thoughtful about, hey, I want to be in a position to mentor and help coach. And it started out as athletes, that I was like, hey, I want to help guys navigate what I've experienced and what I've watched my peers experience. And really at the end of the day, it's not too much different. Again, you don't have the game days, but it really was purposeful for me to want to be in that position in people's lives and help them kind of achieve their desired future state. It's a little bit different. And, it's not quite as loud, but it's just as enjoyable.
Well, great. Well, let's explore that topic a little bit more, that question of sort of financial planning, specifically to talk about your experience and your colleagues' experience in pro sports. So when you went pro, what were some key decisions that you made or that you faced in terms of financial planning at that stage in your life?
Well, I always say, you live life forward and you learn it backwards, and you really, it all hits it pretty fast. I call it the accelerated income arc that pro athletes face, and I went from not quite knowing if I'd get a shot, to be on a team, to getting drafted, and then you get taken in the 6th round. I think my signing bonus was $80,000. I think I have like 44,000 after I bought a car and filled it up and drove out to New York, not knowing if I'd make the team or not. And so then all of a sudden there's just these milestones, and it really moves so fast that you don't really have a chance to sit and wrap your arms around it until after kind of that your senior year of college, right into the combine, right into all-star games, into the draft, rookie mini camp, through the summer. It's a whirlwind, and then finally like, oh, I made the team. Now what? And so you kind of get through that first year. The first thing is obviously you hire. It's really, how do you structure your wise counsel is what I think now looking back. And the first step in that process is you got to hire an agent, and that agent is typically going to play a large role along with the family in deciding like what does the rest of the team look like. And then, I remember sitting down with a financial advisor for the first time, and all of a sudden you're getting, it's a little different than it is today. Now college players are making more than I did when I was in the NFL. But you sit down and, for me, it was the first time meeting a financial advisor, and said, are you aggressive or conservative, or I don't really know what that means. But I said, hey, I'm pretty conservative. And so you just kind of build a plan and stack a plan together. And then you start to learn how taxes work. And, but it's interesting because I think that money's an interesting, dynamic even within the NFL. And it seems so simple that these people, kind of all rally around and point kids in a direction. But, there's a lot of dynamics there, and it's difficult to kind of, force people down a path and really structure that together. So I think you're really just like everybody, you're learning as you go, and you're having these conversations where it's difficult to really uncover, who has my best interest at heart, and who's selling me something, and, who's taking advantage of me. And in worst cases, it's less prevalent now, but back then it was even who's potentially stealing from me. So I think you're just constantly, and some of that creates some dynamics that aren't healthy, where you put your guard up too much. And you tend not to trust anyone. So it's messy, right? And there's not a straight line, and certainly learned a lot of lessons through that, not only for myself, but then watching my peers go through it. And, the reason the NFL is so fascinating is A, there's a lot of money, and B, it goes quick. The career's quick. It's short. So you have this kind of compact period of time where you're making huge, massive decisions that are going to impact your financial future forever.
Interesting. So then you end up leaving the NFL, though not football, in 2009, and you're now a finance professional. You spoke a little bit as to the reasoning behind the career change that brought you to where you are, but I wonder if you could say a little bit more about how you knew that this was going to be a good career for you, and that this was going to be a good use of the skills that you had previously developed.
Well, if I'm going to be honest, I didn't. I was offered a job at the University of Pittsburgh to go coach quarterbacks. So moved the family out to Pittsburgh. We had 3 kids at the time, and coached quarterbacks for 2 years. And I got to the end of that second season, and that was my dream job, really, right? I was one step away from being an offensive coordinator. I was calling some of our plays and working with the quarterbacks, just like my dad, right? That was the movie, and I saw a ton of opportunity in front of me, but one thing that kept pulling at me was I didn't see my family very much, and we had 3 kids at the time, and obviously you can make a lot of money in coaching too, and I was kind of mapping that out. I knew a couple things. I knew we were going to move a number of times if I stayed in that profession, and I knew for the most part, especially if I stayed in college, I was not going to have a ton of time to be with my kids. And my oldest was 8 at the time. And I said, hey, I don't Well, we played Miami on a Saturday, the last game of the regular season. Sunday morning, I got on a flight. I had 12 flights in 14 days recruiting. And that trip is really where I made the decision that I don't think this can be what I do for the rest of my life, because that kid, when he's 8 now, when he's 18, I'm not going to know him. And I don't think that trade-off is worth it. So I came back and told my wife, who, was crying when I told her we were getting into coaching and moving to Pittsburgh. And then she's then about in tears when I'm telling her that I'm done and I can't do this anymore. And I know if I go one more year, it's going to be 20 years. Anyways, we moved back to St. Paul. We still had our house here. And I kind of jumped out of the plane with no parachute. I wasn't sure what was next. I said, all right, I think it's pretty well documented how much athletes struggle. And I think I can say this because I'm one of them, how many mistakes we make and maybe how dumb we are at times on the financial side. But what I also didn't see, if I'm being honest, was the value proposition coming from the other side of the table as truly structure and wise counsel to support that unique position of the accelerated income arc and all the things that the athletes have to deal with while they're playing. And then, as importantly, that team kind of falling apart as they transition. And at the most important time, when their income goes to zero, their identity is completely shifted or lost. And now they have to redefine themselves and build a thoughtful plan to navigate that both personally and financially. I didn't see the value coming from the other side of the table. So I said, you know what? I don't love that world, and it doesn't always feel great to me, but I know some guys that are doing some good work. I'm going to get my Series 7, my 66. I'm going to try and start with some athletes and help them out and kind of see behind the curtain, right? How can I deliver this better? And that's really where it started. Well, I was 34 years old with now our fourth kid coming, and you got a burn rate. So all of a sudden you're like, man, it's hard to start from scratch at 34 years old. So I put my head down and just kind of grinded through it and slowly started building that. What was fun was I went into it thinking athletes are over here and they have such a different experience and it's so different. And then what I learned is it's really the human condition, right? It just manifests itself in slightly different ways. And quickly I drew the line between the athlete's experience and really the business owner experience and the life cycle of, somebody putting their head down and taking over a company from their family or starting from scratch and putting their whole life and all their work into keeping the lights on and keeping their employees there and growing that thing. And then all of a sudden one day they sell it and it's gone. And now it's like, all right, now what? All right. So that was the first kind of line I drew between the athletes I was trying to help and normal people out in the world. So, and from there, I do believe, I think that there's different hurdles, there's different landmines, there's different kind of problems that show up more consistently, and they maybe show up in different ways in people's lives. But at the end of the day, we're all kind of fighting a similar battle.
That's really interesting. So now you've been at this for a while. What do you find most rewarding on a day-to-day basis about what you do for work and how you help people?
There's this thing that happens when you're, especially in coaching, and this is more when I was coaching in high school, but there's a kid that shows up and you can kind of envision the kid. He's not confident. He doesn't quite know how to put his football pads on. His helmet's a little crooked. He doesn't really feel like he belongs. He's kind of standing in the corner. He's maybe a freshman or a sophomore, and he doesn't have a position, and he doesn't quite know. And he's intimidated. He doesn't have confidence. He doesn't have vision for how he fits into the team. And then there's this thing that happens where all of a sudden that switch flips, and he gets to that point, and his eyes look different, right? He now realizes, he understands the vision. He gained the tools and the courage and the confidence to achieve his desired future state. That's what I want to do. It doesn't matter if it's in football or if it's in teaching my kids math, which might be the most difficult thing on the planet, or it's in our financial service. I want to help people achieve their desired future state. And what's rewarding to me is, some of that's financial. We put this is financial, this is wealth planning, this is tax planning, this is legal advice. But there's really underlying that is the human component, right? It is all these things we build, this financial machine we build is really only to allow you to achieve your desired future state in life. And helping people get clear on what that is and how to align their family and their spouse and their kids or whoever it is around that vision and then build the financial machine to support it is really, I think, what's rewarding to me. And I think sometimes we get a little, the tail wags the dog a little bit, and we get a little too focused on, the returns or the tax implications or whatever. It's like, whoa, time out. Like, let's back up and let's help to think about what do we want life to look like? And what do you really want to instill in your kids? And how do you want to spend your time? And then the more you can break that down and get clear about that in the, long term and then back into the short term, it gets a lot easier to build a financial model and plan to support it.
That's a great perspective. And I know my friend who's an elementary school math teacher will appreciate the affirmation. That is a tough job.
God bless them. God bless them. All of them.
Well, this is all great, Brooks. If you wouldn't mind holding on for a moment, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with Plain Money Talk.
Behind every moment, there's a feeling of happiness, of security.
Keep going, pedal, pedal.
Behind every dream,
Order up.
there's a spark.
We got the house.
With every challenge,
Just one more step.
there's a safety net. Behind every victory,
Yes!
there's a team. Behind every moment, there's Bell Bank. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Thanks for everything you've shared so far, Brooks. We've come to about the middle of the episode, and at this point, we typically take a break for story time, which can mean different things depending on who we're talking to and what the subject is. But I feel like today's topic is kind of a no-brainer. The gridiron. Do you have a favorite football story to share with our listeners?
There's so many of them. And the easy one for me is being a freshman and at the University of Wisconsin, and I actually redshirted. But then, my redshirt freshman year, I was, kind of battling for position, and then playing kind of splitting time, and then all of a sudden the other guy got hurt and came in against Michigan, and we ended up losing the game. And then next week I got my first start, which was at Ohio State. And in the horseshoe in prime time, and it's like, all right, here you go, good luck. And we were down 17-0 to start that game, and had a little 2-minute drive at the end of the half, kicked a field goal at 17-3, and we scored 39 unanswered points, and won 42-17 in the horseshoe. And I remember getting interviewed by Lynn Swan, on the 50-yard line of the horseshoe, and Coach Alvarez was laughing because they're leaving early at the horseshoe. The fans are all leaving early. And it was a surreal moment that then, kind of all of a sudden we caught a tidal wave and a monster rally and won our next 9 in a row, including the Rose Bowl. So there was like a flash in my mind from standing with Lynn Swan on the 50-yard line of the horseshoe to sitting in a production meeting with Keith Jackson and Dan Fouts, getting ready to play in the granddaddy of them all. And that run was so special. And I think at the time I knew it was special and it was all fun, but as you look back, just the people we got to do it with and the way we did it and how much fun that was, it's just so unique to catch a stretch like that and have those experiences. But beyond that, I tell people all the time, I got some unbelievable memories from Grand Forks Central, winning homecoming games and winning playoff games. Unfortunately, got clipped by Fargo South in the state championship. But, those moments and those times are no less enjoyable or less important in my mind because there were less people in the stands or it wasn't televised maybe or whatever. Those are some of the most important people in my life and some of the most important times. So, I always tell people just be where you are, because these opportunities are all around us, and they're not less fun or less valuable because there's fewer people watching.
No, that's a great story. And to sort of get back to some of the take homes for our listeners, the things that they can apply to their own life, financially, professionally, personally, thinking about who might be listening to this podcast right now. We may have some listeners who are young people hoping to get into pro sports someday, but probably most of our listeners are already professionals, probably not in sports. So clearly, the kind of experiences you were just talking about, I mean, that's unique to the career you've had. But as you have implied and said, there are some commonalities there between the experiences you've had going through your sports career and other challenges and opportunities people have in their careers. So I wonder if you could say, what are some of the similarities between some of the challenges you faced specifically around financial planning your career, your life, and those that you see people facing in other lines of work? I know you've talked a little bit about entrepreneurs facing some similar challenges when they are transitioning out of maybe having their small business to another line of work. Any other similarities, lessons that our listeners can take away?
Yeah, and candidly, this is all. I think it's all stuff that I, personally. It's the game. You never have the game won, in my opinion, right? You never have it all figured out. It's that growth mindset of constantly being learning of how do I optimize, the time that I have on this earth, and so it's it's fun to help other people. My wife would tell you we still have plenty of work to do. And with the 5 kids and, 5 kids in Catholic school, and now we're starting college and all that, there's plenty of moving parts that we're trying to wrestle with every single day. I think that it's making the time to invest into getting as clear as you can about your desired future state, right? I think for all of us, the biggest threat is life gets noisy and gets busy. And when you're not intentional, you tend to get pulled in so many different directions, right? And I think the more that whether that's, really getting clear about where do we want to be at the end of this year, what are the things that we want to accomplish in this year, for a lot of people, it's retirement date, or planning for retirement. What do we want retirement to look like? What do we want 6 weeks from now to look like? What experiences do I have? So I think spending time just putting that down on paper of hey, here's some things we want to accomplish this year, and here's some things we really want to do in the next 5, and then back into what do we need to do financially to support that. And again, I think the more clear you are about what's important to you and what your goals are, the easier it is for professionals, that are sitting on the other side of the table to help you achieve them and plan for them and save for them. And I'll say 2 more things about that. One is, this is I think very near and dear to my heart because of the transition out of the NFL. Is it's not just making sure you have enough retirement money saved to retire, right? To hit that date and to set that date. That's part of it. But I think it's really getting clear about what is life going to look like after that. Build a vision. Where there is no vision, the people perish. But I think it's really building a vision for what does life look like on the back end of that. Because I will promise everybody that's listening, as much as you think like, this is what I do, it's not who I am, and I'm different, and like it doesn't define me or whatever. When that day comes, it's undefeated. All right. It leaves a gap in your life, and it leaves a hole in your life. And I think that's as impactful as having a thoughtful plan for the distribution of your assets and your cash flow and supporting all that. That's important. But it's also what do I want to do? We spend a lot of time with people saying, hey, now we got to spend some of this money. Like, you've done a great job. You've saved it, and it's here, and now we've planned, and here's what this year's going to look like. Here's what 2 years. Now it's up to you, go enjoy it, go spend it. So I think the sooner you can start building that vision for that. And then if I back up, to kind of people that are mid-career, earlier career is, I think that a lot of the things in our world feel complex and they seem complex, and this financial industry is filled with complexities, but taking that to something that you can understand and that is simplified in your mind, that it's not rocket science at the end of the day, right? If I can understand what my current cash flow looks like, and I can, in football, we'd say block and tackle, right? If you can block and tackle, you're going to win a lot of football games. So it's really easy to get caught up in the, what's this sexy investment doing? What are the guys at the golf course talking about? How did I miss out on that? Oh, if I would have done that, I'd be rich. If I would have invested $5,000 in Apple, 25 years ago, dang it, what was I thinking? But it really is just going back to, hey, here's what's right in front of me. Here's what I can control. Here's how I can block and tackle, and kind of breaking it into those smaller chunks, and keeping yourself accountable. Again, it gets really simple in a hurry. And then as you build that simple foundation, then the opportunities come beyond it, to maybe, expand on, what else is out there and get more into the complex stuff.
Great. Well, that leads right into another topic I wanted to touch on, which is diversifying income streams. This echoes a theme that we've touched on in other episodes of this podcast. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. I wonder, what are some steps that ordinary people can take to diversify our income streams to help sort of keep us safe from some of that uncontrollable tumult that will happen in terms of, changes in the world beyond opportunities, losses, this sort of thing?
Yeah. Again, I go back to step one is understanding your current cash flow, right? And your current income streams and how that money flows. And then, really intentionally setting enough of savings aside to be able to invest that allows you to diversify your future income streams, right? And you can kind of go on this spectrum of, one is being cash flow positive. Then two is having an emergency savings set aside to make sure that you don't blow yourself up. And then as you have enough money to start investing, then it's, build up a discipline plan to make sure that you're saving enough on top of it. Pay yourself first. And then it really gets to, asset location is now where am I investing your money? And again, that's going to depend on the individual situation. But what I often see, if we take retirees as an example, is, maximizing your tax deferred investment, maximizing your 401k, building a Roth so you can have future tax-free income. And the way that you do that is you really have to go out to, okay, here's my retirement date. And the closer that gets, the easier it becomes. But you got to start modeling out, okay, what is my distribution streams going to look like when my income goes away? And if you can start building those today and start building those streams of income for your, or in planning for your future income, again, that'll get simpler. And that's really where a plan will help, and working with a professional, because there's a lot of levers that get pulled and a lot of implications, tax-wise and the like, that really building your personal financial plan alongside of that becomes very important.
So we're talking about investment income streams.
Yeah.
Less so than perhaps, starting a second career just so you have something on the side. Although I suppose some people do that as well.
It was a very difficult thing. Tying this back to the playing career, I think it's a difficult thing for the players to think about, because it kind of feels like you're cheating on yourself, right? Because you're like, hey, I'm so committed to making it as a professional football player. Anytime that I spend thinking about doing something else is kind of giving up on that dream. But what you first got to do is make sure you're doing everything you can within your day job, right? And then, am I really buttoned down and detailed on how my life is structured, how I'm spending my time, to make sure that I'm checking every box that I just mentioned within the world. Then I think once you've done all that, now you can start investigating on, am I an influencer? Am I, writing blogs? Am I buying a car wash? And then it kind of peels into with your side business and how am I building that to support kind of my tax position and diversifying my risk as well. So, creating that secondary income, that passive income, I think is outstanding. I tend to think about it more from how do we plan to invest to create passive income in a tax efficient manner. To me, that's kind of the blocking and tackling of phase one. Then it's really up to the individual and the skill set and their ability to manage. Because, some of that passive, it can become not so passive as well. And it can become a time suck, and it can become a little bit of a potential landmine if you're overinvested in it. So again, the chair that I sit in is more often building a thoughtful financial plan, creating investment opportunities that tax efficiently create diversified income. And then, like you said, there's all kinds of fun stuff, but you better have a thoughtful plan to be able to do that.
I'm imagining the conversation that would have happened if in an alternate timeline you were advising Paul Newman. He says, Brooks, I'm thinking salad dressing. Maybe do some good in the world.
Yeah. There's, we could probably fill a whole other podcast on the restaurants and gyms and nightclubs and stuff that professional athletes thought were great sources of passive income that ended up, maybe blowing them up a little bit. So, the salad dressing thing, that I wouldn't have seen that coming.
Great. Well, I want to respect your time. I won't take too much more of it. But as we get closer to wrapping up, we've talked a lot about how people can prepare for big transitions in their life, whether that is changing careers, whether that is moving, whether that is retiring. I wonder if you have any sort of final thoughts for people who are anticipating these kind of transitions in their life and just how they can, maybe from a coaching standpoint, get their, head in the right spot, their head in the game to handle that upcoming transition.
Yeah, I think number one is invest the time to slow down and create some white space to really be thoughtful and map it out and just think about it. I think, again, it's just a threat of getting so busy. So I think step one is just invest the time and create the time, whether it's with your spouse or yourself, just to really get your thoughts in order and be thoughtful. And then I think the second one is it's never too late. There shouldn't be any barriers in seeking wise counsel, right? I think that, and I'm sorry, I was searching for the right words a little bit, but I think that too often we feel like we missed the boat or we don't know something we should know, or we're not really worthy of having this conversation because we're not quite there yet. And it's kind of like, well, I'm going to get this figured out. I'm going to make the money and then I'm going to go ask for the help. And I've been guilty of that. And certainly a lot of, my peers have. So I think it's go ask the question, get curious, seek wise counsels, ask great questions, to build that team around you that can help you get clear and achieve that desired future state. They're out there and they want to help you. Oftentimes it just takes kind of the courage to get over the hump to go ask. And, we see it every day in our world as nobody's got this all figured out. I think especially in the social media era and everything, we think maybe everybody else has it figured out a little bit more than we do. But the people that I see that end up being the most, kind of successful and buttoned down from our chair are the ones that are willing to push forward and ask the questions and seek advice, and get really curious on how things work. And again, they're out there. It's just a matter of getting organized and then going and finding and asking a lot of questions until you understand.
That's great. Well, thank you, Brooks. And to the point of wise counsel, there's a last question that we ask every guest on this podcast, and it's always the same. What's one piece of financial advice you wish you'd been given a long time ago?
I think, pay yourself first. Make that a priority. The sooner the better, and just stick to it.
And you are not the first guest to raise that piece of advice. So I think this is just affirming for our listeners that this is a good piece of financial advice. So thanks for everything that you've shared with us today, Brooks. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. It was a pleasure.
Thanks to everybody for listening to this episode of Plain Money Talk. Brooks' transition from the NFL shows that long-term stability requires more than just a paycheck. It also takes intentional diversification. Whether you are navigating a career change like Brooks or saving for the future, Bell Bank Wealth Management is here to help. Their advisors can put together a specialized plan to help you move forward with confidence. So don't just manage your money. Prepare for your next chapter with a partner who understands your goals and can help you reach them. Visit bell.bank/wealth to connect with an advisor today. Bell Bank Wealth Management products are not FDIC insured, have no bank guarantee, may lose value, are not a deposit, and not insured by any federal government agency.